All right, this is what we're going to create. A compliant SBIR or STTR budget in DSIP that gets you as much money as possible. And it's actually pretty easy, so long as you do not go in the order DSIP lays out. Because creating a budget isn't hard, but it is fiddly, so I am going to do everything twice. First, I'll give you the theory, so I'm going to explain what each part of the DSIP portal's budget section means. And then we'll fill out that section together based on a hypothetical SBIR that we're going to create. So theory, then application, again and again until we have a complete budget. And the stuff we'll do together will probably take like 30 minutes, and you'll probably have to do a little extra research on your own, and that might take another 30 minutes. But bottom line, you should be able to have a full budget in about an hour. Also, all of this is the same whether you're doing an SBIR or an STTR, so I'm just going to say SBIR, but assume that it applies to both. And we're going to use this SBIR as the example. And I chose the Army because they have the hardest budget. So if you can do an Army budget, you can do any of the DoD budgets. All right, so I already logged into DSIP, so we're going to go ahead and start the new proposal. All right, program phase 1, component, we're going to say, we're going to do the Army. Topic is going to be this one, remote breaching. And proposal titles, well, this is just budget demo. All right, we're going to create the proposal that we'll use in this video. All right, so we have our sample SBIR created. Now let's go to volume 3, cost volume. Accept any pop-ups, and this one is just saying that as you change things, the percentage complete will update, but this pop-up appears again and again and again, which sucks. And some context. To my knowledge, no one has ever lost an SBIR on their price. The budget for all these awards is allocated years in advance, so the money's there. And there's no bonus points for coming in low on price. But I also recommend against gaming the system and hitting the budget exactly on the nose, because then it looks like you're more interested in the money than in doing the work, and I don't know, that might hurt your chances of winning. So our goal is to get you really, really close to the maximum allowable budget, but not quite there. All right, so to start, let's go into the cost volume, and I recommend building your budget like this. First, we're going to tell DSIP what kinds of things we need to spend money on to do the work. So do we need people? Do we need subcontractors? Do we need materials? Stuff like that. Then we're going to put in our rates. So G&A, overhead, and profit. And then we're going to put in our costs. And here in number 6, the list of costs are going to reflect what we selected in number 1. So your list may look a little different from mine, but that's not a problem. Then finally, we'll fiddle our numbers to get close to the max budget, and then we'll go to review, make sure we did everything right, and hit submit. So first step, let's tell DSIP what kinds of things we need to spend money on. So when you click on volume 3, cost volume, you should see this, and just leave the top row alone. All your rates should already be checked. Now, if you're using subcontractors, check this box. And if you're doing an STTR, the university partner is a subcontractor, so make sure you check it. Next, if you're going to buy materials to do the work, click this box. And materials are things you'll consume to do the work. So chemicals for tests, stuff to build your physical product, AWS time, anything like that. Next, if you're going to buy supplies to do the work, click this box. And supplies are one of two things. Either they're consumables you need, but not for the research, so packing materials, shipping supplies, stuff like that, or things used to make your product that are not easy to quantify, so if you're using thread or elastic sheet or anything like that. Next, if you're going to buy equipment to do the work, click this box. And equipment is stuff you need to do the work that will not be consumed at the end. So for example, test tubes or lab equipment or computers. Next, if you need to travel to do the work, check this box. And common reasons you need to travel are if you need to make trips to see your SBIR sponsor, trips to the customer to do interviews, trips for SBIR awardee conferences, or any other trips made in support of the work. Next, TABA is supplemental money to help commercialize the research under the SBIR. And it's a little advanced and varies by agency, so I'm not going to go into it here. But if you want to apply, feel free to check this box, but make sure you read up on this agency's TABA processes first and whether TABA has been authorized for this SBIR. And if you don't care about TABA, don't sweat it. It's typically not a ton of money, so just leave this block empty. Honestly, I'm not sure what would be in the other, but if you have any other costs, I guess check it. Next, I recommend selecting partial payments, so you'll invoice on a schedule, which is much easier for everyone. And that's the Volume 3 tab. Now let's work through an example. So here's what I think we're going to need to spend money on to deliver this hypothetical SBIR. So we're going to need some engineers. We're going to need some a range to handle some testing, so we're going to want a subcontractor for that. In the materials camp, we're going to need components for the prototype. For our supplies, we're going to need some radio or vehicle batteries. Equipment, we may need some testing equipment. And let's say that we want to do one trip to meet our end users. So with that in mind, let's fill out our Volume 3 cost volume. So we said we got a subcontractor, yes. We are going to have some materials, we're going to have some supplies, we're going to have a little equipment, one trip. And for this example, I'm not going to put in TABA because I don't know if it's authorized for this SBIR. I can't think of any other costs. And as I said, partial payments are just much easier. So once you're complete, hit save and continue. Next, we're going to skip all the cost sections and fill in your rates. Here's why I'm going out of order. If we go in DSIP order and you fill in your personnel costs next, well, you're not going to actually know how close you are to hitting that maximum allowable budget because the personnel costs you put in won't have the G&A or overhead or your profit baked into them. So you're going to put in all your personnel costs, and then you're going to end up adding the rates, and all of a sudden it's going to pop up your total budget by like 40%, and all of a sudden you're over. Whereas if we fill in your rates next, then we fill in your personnel costs or your material costs. Then when those costs are added to your total budget, it'll have all of the rates added to the number, so you'll be able to see how close you are at every moment. All right. So starting with overhead, 99% of the time, you'll want to use an overhead rate, not a fixed cost. Next, add your overhead rate here. And if you use our rates worksheet from the rates class, your overhead rate is here in the totals tab. So just copy that in. And quick note, when you're preparing your rates for an SBIR, you should include all your current, so non-SBIR based employees and non-employee costs, and all the costs you would have if you won. Don't create new rates just for this SBIR. Now, if you're a big business with lots of projects, this segregation of costs can be challenging, but if you're big, you probably have an accountant, so ask your accountants to give you your rates. Next, DSIP whether to add overhead to your materials and supplies and other costs. And if you didn't select materials or supplies or whatever, you won't get these questions. Not a problem. But if you go back and add materials later, DSIP will add these questions, and you'll have to come back to the overhead section to answer them. It's easy, but it can be confusing when you think you've completed the overhead section and all of a sudden it shows as incomplete because you did something that seems unrelated. But regardless, I generally recommend selecting yes for all these questions because we included all of these elements in our overhead rate calculations. Now, write down an overview of what things got included in your overhead rates, and we'll click Save and Continue. And for Army applications, we'll get asked to fill in our overhead info in the option. If you don't get this screen, just ignore this part. And let me explain a little bit about what the option is. So as far as I know, the Army is the only organization that does this, but basically they want their SBIRs broken into two pieces, a base and an option. And the base can be worth up to $200,000, and the option has a maximum threshold of $50,000. And if your rates will change between doing the base and doing the option work, well, you can put different rates in here to be able to give yourself different rates when they compute their budgets. And if your rates aren't going to change, then just copy the rate information from your base into your option, because you can't leave the option blank. You've got to put something there. And we're going to do this for basically every screen, so get used to copying stuff from your base and pasting it into your option. And if you get into more advanced SBIRs, you might do one that lasts longer than a year. And in that case, you might see the option renamed Year 2. Exact same idea. Just do the same thing that we're talking about here for the option, just do it for the Year 2. So let's go to our example. All right, so here we are back in our Volume 3. I'm going to come down here to overhead. So I just skipped direct labor. And as we discussed, I'm going to select a rate. And now I need to put in the rate. So I'm going to come over here to my rate worksheet. So hopefully you use this. If not, hopefully you got some good rates from your accountants. So we're looking for overhead. So check it out. So these are all of my expenses. So these are expenses for my current contracts, the work I'm doing, my employees that I already have, And these costs include the costs that I would incur if I won this SBIR. So that includes the cost of goods. So this is a truck that was part of my cost base from a previous contract. This stuff down here, these are costs that I would incur if I won the SBIR. Same thing on my personnel. Here I am, I'm going to be the principal investigator, so I'm listed here. This engineer is somebody I would hire if I won the SBIR. These other people down here are people I already employ. So again, include everything in this rate calculator. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch our rates class. It will walk you through this so you can have rates in about maybe 30 minutes tops. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my overhead rate. It's only a 1.2, super. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it in here. So 1.25 is my overhead rate. Oh, should I apply the overhead to my direct materials cost? Well, yes, because I included my direct materials costs in my rate calculator. So yep, great, yes, it's the same thing, rate 1.25, same thing, apply the overhead to the direct supplies costs, yes. Same rationale here. It's going to apply to everything because we included everything when we were calculating our overhead. So in this case, we did not include travel in our rate calculation. So for this one, I am going to say no. Now it says, please specify the different cost sources that went into this. So what we included in here was, we included our material costs. We included our labor. We included our phones, computers, and phone plan. All right, great. Let's just include that. Phones and computers. So these first are the direct costs that went into computing our overhead, and then these are the actual overhead costs that went into that part of the calculation. Save and continue. So here we are for the option on the overhead rate. So we're going to want to just repeat what we did before. So I'm assuming that there are going to be no changes between the base and the option. Our overhead rate is going to stay at a 1.25. So I'm just going to go ahead and start listing that out. Apply to materials, yes. Direct supplies, those were included in our initial calculations, so yes. Equipment was included. Yes. All right, direct travel was not included. No. So once again, we're just going to copy what we put into the base. Great, that's what we included in this rate. Save and continue. Next, G&A is almost identical to overhead. So grab your G&A from your worksheet. There may be a couple of questions that are different on the G&A side, but same principle. If you included an expense in your G&A rate calculation, then say yes here. If you didn't include it, say no. So in our worksheet, we included labor and supplies and material, so we're going to check yes on all of those, but we didn't list travel or subcontractors or overhead. Well, we do list overhead, but we already have an overhead, and checking yes here would be double dipping, so select no on overhead. And remember, your list of options here may be different depending on what you chose initially, and that's not a problem. Next, list what kinds of things went into your G&A, just like we did in overhead. Then repeat for the option, hit save, and continue when you're done. All right, now let's fill this out for our hypothetical proposal. So I'm going to come over here to my worksheet, look at my total. My G&A is a 1.8%. By the way, these rates are a little artificially low, but this is about showing you how to build a budget, not about what good rates look like. All right, so we're going to bring them in here. All right, so here we are. We're going to put a 1.8 in, apply it to direct labor, yes. Overhead costs, we're going to say no on that because we already have an overhead rate that with separate cost bases. To subcontractor costs, no, we did not include subcontractors in our rate analysis. Direct material costs, we did include those. So yes, supplies, we included those. We did include equipment. We did not include travel. Great. So again, the direct costs, which is half of the calculation for G&A, so we can talk about that, direct labor and supplies. And then for our other half of the G&A equation, we've got an accountant, we've got insurance, some advertising, and training. Basically, we're just going to include all of these things that we included in our G&A calculation. Training, rent, office, supplies. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this so that we can use it in the option because that's about to pop up. Save and continue. And as you can see, we now have to fill it out once again for the option. So 1.8, and then direct labor, yes. Overhead, nope. Subcontractors, nope. Materials, yes. Supplies, yes. Equipment, yes. No travel, and there was no change, so all the same things go in here. Great. Once you've finished, hit save and continue. Next, we'll move on to profit and cost sharing. And first thing is to list any part of the work under this SBIR that you want to pay for rather than have the government pay for. And at first blush, this can seem like a really dumb idea. I mean, of course you'd rather get paid to do research than pay for it yourself. That's the whole reason you're applying for an SBIR. So here's why you might care. When the government funds R&D, they expect to receive limited but real IP rights in the IP produced. So imagine this. 95% of the R&D under your SBIR is stuff you don't really care about. It's, generic testing. It's doing stuff where there's no real aha. It would be fine if the government had limited IP rights in it. But 5% of your work is like the crown jewels. It's your secret sauce. It's the thing that makes everything else work. And maybe it's very valuable to you for your commercial applications. Bottom line, you might say, I do not want the government to have any claim on any of this little slice. Well, in this case, you might suggest that you'll pay for that research yourself. That way, the government cannot make any claim on it. Now, this is a business decision, and so you really have to make it for yourself. But if you elect to pay for some of the R&D yourself, it's going to raise some questions. Worst case scenario, it might hurt your chances of winning. Best case scenario, the government's going to want to say, wait a minute, will the other R&D that you produce and give us access to, is it worth anything if we don't have access to this little bit that you're paying for yourself? So be prepared for some questions. And second, SBIR IP rights are actually really good for you as the performer. And if you want more information on how SBIR IP rights work, check the link in the description below. I wrote an entire guide on SBIR IP with a friend. But bottom line, think hard before you elect to pay for some of the R&D yourself. Next, let's add a profit margin. And I hear all kinds of things about what kinds of profit margins are acceptable, but I've always put 7%. It's never been an issue for me. All right, so let's do it for our hypothetical proposal here. So I'm going to skip all of these direct costs and come down here to profit. All right, cost sharing. I don't want to have any questions raised by the government, so I'm going to put 0 cost sharing. Great. And profit, I'm just going to put 7%. And for my justification, I'm going to say typical SBIR standard profit rate. Honestly, never had anybody challenge me, so I don't know anything better to put there. All right, we're going to hit save and continue. And we got to do it again for the option. No cost sharing, 7%, and paste in the same justification. Great. Save and continue. And once you hit save on the profit screen, you'll come to the review screen. But ignore that, because we have to go back and enter all of our costs. So let's start with direct labor costs. So first we have to share some information about who's going to lead the R&D. And that person is called the principal investigator or PI. So list their current title, their education, and their years of experience. And for years of experience, I include any years spent doing work that's aligned with the work under this SBIR. Next, if you use the rate worksheet or if your accountant made you rates, check yes. Next, list how many hours this person will work on the SBIR if you win, and enter their hourly rate, which should come from the BLS and should be on your rates worksheet. Also make sure to include their fringe rate, also from the rates worksheet. And quick note on the hours. The PI has to spend at least 51% of their time on the SBIR. So figure out the total hours they have during the performance period, and they have to spend more than half of those on this project. Now, they could spend 100% of their time on this project, but it has to be above 51%. And assuming you included everything in your fringe analysis, check yes. And list what you included in your fringe. So days off, taxes, benefits, all the other things on that fringe worksheet. And if your hourly rates are above the BLS hourly rate range, change them to fall in line with BLS. You're competing for free money from the government, so don't get greedy. Above market rates invite a lot of questions, and they aren't going to help you win. Next, add the BLS link from the rates worksheet here, and you can include PDF downloaded reports from the BLS website to support your hourly rate here, but you don't have to if you put in the link. Then save and continue. So if you're doing an SBIR budget that has an option, I recommend against filling in the option right now. And that's because for the Army, you need to be below $200,000 in your base and below $50,000 in your option. But DSIP only shows you the total. So if you fill in the base and the option now, it's really hard to max out the budget. And you'll spend an hour tweaking numbers and getting error messages, and it sucks. So if you have a base and an option, or a base and a year two, I recommend doing all the base costs first, tweaking the numbers to get as close to the max as you can for the base, and then doing everything for the option all at once. So we're skipping the option for now, so hit save and continue. Now, if you have more than the PI working on this project, you can add another person. And for the additional people, say if they're key personnel. And key personnel are people who are critical to deliver the work under this SBIR. And designating a role as being key personnel has a couple implications. First, you're going to have to provide a resume for that person. Number two, if you have very strong key personnel, it will help you win. On the other hand, if you have weak key personnel, it can help you lose. If someone is listed as being key personnel, you better have talked to them ahead of time and have at least gotten some tacit agreement that they will join this project if you win it. And if you don't know who's going to fill the role, so you don't have a person in mind, just don't list that role as key personnel. It's fine. The government needs to know what roles you plan on filling so they know, hey, has this team properly thought through who they need to be able to deliver the work? Have they properly allocated costs for all the people they need to do the work? But saying that a particular role, especially like an engineer, somebody who doesn't have a specific skill set that you need, saying that they're not key personnel, not a problem. Not going to hurt your chances of winning. I'm going to be the PI for this effort. So my role within my company, I'm the CEO, which closest thing I've been able to find here is chief executive. Super. What's my level of education? I've got a master's. How many years of experience do I have? I've got about 19 years of experience. Calculate the regulated. Is there a fringe rate? Yes, there is. All right. So this is a 6-month effort. So half a year, 2,000 hours of workable time over the course of a year. So I need to spend more than half of that on this. So half of 2,000, 1,000. I'm going to spend about 1,100 hours. And that's realistic. I think that's what I'm going to spend. All right, number two, I need to put in my rate. So I'm going to come back to my rate worksheet, go to this first tab. So I already looked this up in the BLS website. If you want to know more about that, check out our rates class. So I chose the median salary for my position, which is $118 an hour. Wonderful. 118. Now enter my fringe rate. So I'm going to look across here, and my fringe rate is 17%. Excellent. 17%. That's my total cost. Save. Great. Now, are the labor rates detailed above fully loaded? Yes, they are. All right, please explain any costs that apply. Well, I included my days off. I included employer share of taxes, and I included benefits. And we'll be specific. We'll say state and federal taxes. Great. Thus the justification. Wonderful. All right, now I need to justify that the hourly rate I submitted was reasonable. So I'm going to come over here. So this is the link to the BLS page for my listing, for my role. Great, there it is. I've included the link, so I don't need to upload anything here. And I'm going to go ahead and save. Now, as I said, this is an Army proposal, so I could fill in my option, but if I do that, it's going to make it really hard for me to figure out where costs are and how to maximize my total budget. So I'm going to skip it for now. But we do have another person on the team, so I'm going to add another role. Okay. So are they key personnel? No. We don't know who they are yet. Alrighty. So they are going to be my engineer. What's their labor category? And they're going to be an electronics engineer, is probably the closest thing. They've got a bachelor's degree. How many years of experience do they have? So let's say we'll hire someone with 4 years of experience. Great. And we already calculated this, so yes. So there is a fringe rate. I can come back to my worksheet here. Here's my engineer, $55 an hour. How many hours do I think they're going to be used? So for a 6-month effort, I'm probably going to have this person on there half-time. So we're going to go ahead and put 1,000 hours, their fringe rate. Also 17%. Wonderful. 17%. And we're going to save it. Save. Are they fully loaded? Yes, they are. Explain the costs. I should have copied it from my previous entry, but that's fine. So it was going to be days off, benefits, taxes. It's fine. All right. Grab that BLS listing for the engineer to justify the salary or the hourly rate. I'm going to add that link here. Don't need anything else. Save and continue. The system is going to ask me to do the option, but I don't want to do the option right now. And I'm going to come down here, save and continue. Next, we're going to fill in all your non-personnel costs. So you may not have all of these, but I'm going to run through them all, so just ignore the ones that don't apply to you. I'm going to lump supplies and materials together because they have the same questions. So when you see this screen, first thing, put in what it is you need to buy, who you're going to buy it from, how much you're buying, what the unit costs are, whether you're going to use this for other projects, and generally the answer should be no, since your materials should be consumed over the course of the SBIR. Next, say whether the prices are based on a competitive selection process. Then, say whether you're going to use up the material over the course of the SBIR. And again, generally the answer here should be yes. If not, this thing may actually be equipment. Then, say whether you have documentation of your competitive sourcing. And this could be quotes from vendors, screenshots from company pricing pages, screenshots from Amazon or other marketplaces, or anything else that demonstrates that you tried to get the best price. Now, upload any docs that support your efforts. So typically these are screenshots or PDFs. And if you have multiple types of materials, come up to the top, click Add Another Material, and then you're going to fill in the same questions for that material. So basically, at the end, every supplier material you want the government to pay for should be recorded here in DSIP. All right, let's go to our example. So here we are. We're going to come into materials. All right, so we said in our cost of goods, we were going to buy rubber for some treads. All right. So we're going to use treads. Great. The vendor we chose was going to be Atlantic Tread. Quantity, we need 2 of them. Cost per item, let's call it, they're about $7,500 a piece, which is insane. Good point. Don't put commas in here. Also, while we're talking about that, do not include cents. So don't put 7,500.75. It'll throw an error later in the process. All right, is this exclusive for this contract? Yes, it is. I don't need treads for other things. Did we competitively source it? Yes, we did. Is it consumable? Yes, it is, because it is going to be consumed into the prototype that we will create. And do we have supporting documentation for this ODC? Yes, we do. All right, so here's where we would go in, and we're going to go ahead and select Upload. And generally DSIP is annoying, so you have to upload these one at a time. Great. Select another file, second quote. Say, you have to wait for it to fully upload. So go ahead and upload whatever documentation you have to validate that you got a competitive price. Save and continue. All right. And by the way, as you can see, we've already gone over budget. That's fine. We're going to work on the numbers in a little bit. All right, and by the way, if you have multiple types of materials you need to add, go ahead and add additional materials. They'll give you an opportunity to add, second, third, fourth materials. Next, we would come into supplies and exact same process. What are you buying? Who are you buying it from? Tell them all about it, and then upload your justification. Next, we have to cost out our travel. So for each trip, list out the basics: who, what, when, where, why, and how much. Then click Save. And if you have multiple trips, add the next one. All right, so in our example, we said we're going to do one trip from Virginia to Ohio. So let's go ahead and make that trip in our example. All right, so here we are in travel. So we're going to say the trip is going to be a customer visit. Location is going to be from Arlington, VA to Ohio. Number of people probably just be me. I'm going to do it as a 2-day trip, total airfare. So I think the easiest thing is to just come to any flight aggregator. I'm going to put in where I'm flying out of, which is going to be Washington, D.C. I don't care which airport, to Ohio. We want to go to Columbus. And, this is just an estimate. So let's say that we did it in January. Perfect. Coming back the next day. And let's see what we got. And we can see, and here we can see prices for flights. So I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot because I'm going to need that to justify the rates I put in. And it looks like a reasonable flight is going to be in the ballpark of maybe $160. Perfect. So I'm going to come in here and say total airfare $160. Then I would do the same thing. I'd go to my car rental agency, figure out what a reasonable car rental price looks like. I don't want to take the time to do that while you're watching. So let's just say, for sake of argument, it's going to be $100. And then total per diem. For those of you who aren't familiar, come here, GSA. So the state is going to be Ohio. And by the way, this link is in the description below. We're going to Columbus, Ohio. Find rates. For Columbus, looks like $122 a day. Fantastic. We put in $122. We're not going to put in any other costs. Purpose of the trip is going to be a customer visit. Sources of the estimates are kayak, whatever rental car you used, and we used GSA. Explanation, justification, just why do you need to make this trip? We need to, whatever it is you need to do that justifies making this trip, save it. And if you need to make a second trip, you can add more trips here, but that's about it. All right, once all the non-personnel costs are in, review the totals here. And you shouldn't have any additional information. Everything should have been captured already. I guess if you have something else, add it where it belongs, then hit save and next. Now, if you're using subs, you have to provide a stupid amount of information on them. And if you're doing an STTR, your university partner is a sub. So put in their name, then provide the name and contact information for the person on their team that handles the budget. Next, say whether you have a letter of commitment from that sub, and you really should have one. If you don't, consider not listing them. Not having a letter of commitment is kind of amateur hour, and I think it could hurt your chances of winning. Now the sucky part. You have to basically build a simplified budget for the sub in DSIP. But what makes it much easier is that you don't have to deal with all the rates as percentages. So just list the types of people they'll provide, their rates and hours and dollar value for their overhead, G&A, and other costs. And of course, if they're providing more than one person or more than one thing, you can add additional rows for additional people and expenses here. Put their rates down here in this section. If the sub's going to buy any materials or supplies, put that here. Now, if you don't have their budget details, you can just put the total amount they'll be paid and let the government contact the sub. And this is a tough call. I think this looks less credible. But if the sub has a critical capability that will help you win, but they won't share their detailed rates, well, then this is the best option. All right, so here we are in the subcontractor. So for us, it's going to be the tester. And then whatever, Joe Smith. I'm just going to make a bunch of stuff. Title, whatever, phone, 123, 123, 1234. Obviously, this is not real, of course. joe@hotmail.com. Do you have a letter of commitment? Yes. Make sure you upload the letter of commitment. And you have to if you say yes, you have to upload the letter. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete the section. I'm just going to upload some random thing. This is obviously not a letter of commitment. Doesn't matter. All right. Am I able to provide a detailed budget? Let's say yes. All right. So the first thing they're going to be providing. All right. So the person they're going to be providing is someone who's going to help us with our testing. So an electrics engineer. Their role is test advisor. Their hours, not going to be many hours. Let's say they'll probably provide about 25 hours. Their rate, $55 per hour, just like any other engineer. Next, we're going to put in their rates, and this is just a single number. So let's just say that we're going to get charged $150 in overhead. Explain what's going into that overhead. Is it their phone? Is it their office expenses? Whatever it is. Same thing here. Let's just say they're not going to charge us any G&A on it, so we don't need to justify it. And they're going to charge us whatever, $100 in profit, explanation, reasonable profit. Does this subcontractor have any other direct costs? Let's say they do, yeah. Let's say that they are going to need to get some testing equipment, some testing supplies. So this is going to be supplies, and it's going to be whatever it is. Test chemicals, I have no idea. The vendor is going to be Chemical Co., and the cost, let's just say, for example, $200. So list out all the things that are going into the amount that you're paying this subcontractor. Save and continue. Predictably, you have to put it in for the option. So if the subcontractor was going to work for you in the option, you would copy all that information forward. Just for this simple example, let's just say that you only want them for the base. So save and continue. And the budget number should be right at the top of the allowable limit for the base if you're doing an Army proposal, or the total budget if you're doing a proposal for anyone else. Next, we're going to go back and fiddle with our costs to get as close to the max budget as we can. Then, just for the people with an option, we're going to start filling in the option values for each of our costs. And just be aware that if your option total is higher than $50K, you'll get an error. If that happens, just go into your option costs and shave some of the hours or units or whatever until you get into the allowable range. All right, let's do that for our example. All right, so here's our example. So we've only put in the base numbers, and we're already way above target. So the total allowable budget is $250,000, but we've only put in the base, and the total for the base, the maximum for the base is $200,000. So we need to shave about $57,000 out of our costs. And the easiest way to do that is going to be like this. All right. So by far the biggest cost is my salary in this, the principal investigator's salary. So I can basically bring this cost, the total cost, down in one of two ways. I can either reduce the total number of hours, or I can reduce the rate per hour. But here's the thing. I really can't reduce the hours that much because as the principal investigator, I need to be doing 51% of my time on this project. So really that leaves me with dropping my hourly rate. So let's drop that down to $80 an hour and see what happens. Okay. We're pretty close. That almost did it. All right, so we got down to 203,000. We need to get down to just under 200,000. So tell you what, let's bring that down to 77 an hour. All right, perfect. We wanted to hit 200,000, around 199,000. And by the way, 77,000 is probably a little low on the BLS standard. The government's not going to bat an eye if you're charging below the range. Okay. So now we're in target for the base. Now we're going to go back, and because this is an RB proposal, we're going to handle the option. So let's come over here. First of all, we're going to save this. All right, so we're going to come in here for the option. So we're in our direct labor costs. We've got our base in a good place. So let's come into the option. All right, we have to fill all the information back in. So we fill in chief executive. We got a master's. I think we said we had 19 years of experience. Our employee hours, this is going to be about 2 months worth of work in the option. So let's just say for starters, maybe about 120 hours. We set a $77 per hour rate. We have a 17% fringe. So let's go ahead and save. Yep, fully loaded. Yep, here are all the things that went into our fringe calculation, our justification. If any of this isn't there, make sure you add it. All right. So now you'll notice that our engineer has fallen off. So in our base, we had our chief executive as the principal investigator and an engineer. When we come over to our option, the engineer is gone. So if that's the case for you, make sure you add them. Okay, not key personnel, role, engineer, labor category, what do we call them? Doesn't really matter. Electrical engineer, bachelor's. I think they said they were going to have 4 years of experience. Is the fringe rate? Yes. Their hours, let's start it off at about 120 hours. Also, rate 55 an hour, fringe 17%. Okay, and then of course, if any of this isn't there, make sure you put in there, are they fully loaded? Yes. What in there? The BLS listing that we pulled off of our Excel spreadsheet. Great, save and continue. All right, 218. Now we want to come in here and do our other costs. So the option period for any of our, let's say, our materials. Great, and we would just put in the exact same thing. As you can see, I already came in here and put some of this stuff in, but let's just say for sake of argument, there were no materials needed, no new materials needed to be purchased, so you just put description, NA, vendor, NA, quantity, 0, cost per item, 0, exclusive, blah, 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 answer the questions like you did before. Great, save and continue. And the exact same thing. So you need to put all your information back in for the option. So, like for example, here on the travel, you may have no plans to travel in the option period. You still need to say no, 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 0 people, 0 days. It is super dumb, but you still have to do it. So just put in nothing, nothing, nothing. Subcontractors, if you're not going to use a subcontractor, you still need to say, okay, there is no subcontractor. There is no point of contact. There is no contact phone number. Great. You have to put it in there. So as we can see now, our total budget is 218. We can go up to 250. So there's, like I said, there's no advantage to not taking all the money, to not hitting pretty close to the total value. So let's go ahead and bump up those option numbers. And remember, you can't bump the base above 200. We're just right there, almost at 200. So I'm not going to mess with our base. But I'm going to come into the option. I don't want to mess with the rates because it would be a little weird to pay the chief executive $77 an hour in the base, but more than 77 in the option. But you figure there are about 160 hours per month of work time, 2 months. That's 320. So a little bit more than that, we can probably get that number up. Let's see what happens if we go to 200 here, save, and we bump up our engineer also to 200 hours. All right, now we're at 232. Might as well just keep getting that up a little bit higher. So, because as I've said, there's no bonus points for being below value. So let's just keep tweaking our numbers. All right, 240, and this seems dumb, and yeah, it is dumb. But at the same time, I have never made an SBIR budget where I didn't play this game of just trying to push the numbers up little by little until we hit, where we needed to be. All right, 249. We actually maybe just should tie it. So even though we're below budget, we're at 249. I think this may have put us over the 50,000 total, which is ridiculous. But we're going to find out here in a minute when we try to do the review. So here's what we should be seeing right now is 100%. So if you filled in all the options and hit save, you should see 100%, 100%. Yep, I'm seeing 100% all the way down. The only thing you shouldn't see 100% is here on your volume 3 cost volume. That should be at 99. So we come down here to review. You should see nothing against these. If you see any of them with a red incomplete next to it, we'll click into it, see what's going on. Common reasons that you'll see an incomplete would be if there were, you put decimals. So if you put $77.23 an hour, those cents will cause an error. Maybe you put a comma into something. Maybe you forgot to hit save. Maybe you filled in your base information, but you didn't fill in your option information. Whatever reason, that can throw an error. If you find other errors, please include them in the comments below so that we can all learn from them. Let's see if we can submit. And this is what I thought. Yeah. So apparently our budget for the option is just slightly above. We can be up to 50,000, but as we can see, we're 51,000. So let's just shave about $1,000 out here, out of the option. And don't shave it out of the base, shave it out of the option. So we need to get it down. So let's just bring that down to, I don't know, 285. That should get us there. Yeah, that should be plenty. And, fair, whatever. We're at the limit's 250. We're at 247. If you want to fiddle around and get that last, $2,000 to hit it closer, go right ahead. It's so close that I'm happy with it. All right, let's see now. So let's go back to review now that we've shaved that little bit of option value. Submit. And it has been successfully submitted. So here we are. And just one quick note on this. So now we see everything is at 100%. Great. The little pie chart up here is 100%. If you go back in and you change something for whatever reason, you change the cost of your subcontractor, you change some materials, that's fine. You can go back, you can do it. But you will have to come back down here to review and resubmit. Not a big deal, easy to do. And that's it. You have an SBIR budget. And if you have any questions on how to build the rates for your budget, check out our video here. And if you have other questions on how SBIR can fit into your commercial roadmap and help you build your business, check out our video here.